So solar here is split into solar farms and rooftop solar. So obviously you know what solar farms mean. It's set up on mountains, on abandoned lands, on water bodies, which can also reduce evaporation, and some large number of solar panels, no fixed number, but we will see that they are now beginning to be competed against. Like the biggest solar farm is going to come up in Australia. There are papers written about what happens if you put solar farms over entire Sahara Desert and so on and so forth. So by this book's calculations, the ranking by 2050 is going to be number 8 with a 36.9 gigaton reduced CO2, which is pretty substantial. Net cost is minus 80.6 billion, so it's going to be, when you are all done with the time scale of the 2050, the payoff is going to be much larger than the investments, and net savings are going to be over 5 trillion US dollars. I'm going to just add a few maps here of the share of primary energy from renewable sources in 2019. Our data in world is always a great resource. I always use these in various courses whenever I can find useful data on that site. So this is showing renewable energy sources including hydropower, solar, wind, geothermal, bioenergy, wave, and tidal. It does not include traditional biofuels, which can be a key energy source, especially in lower income settings. So you can see the range here in terms of percentages of the primary energy in each country. So country like China is up over 20 to 30%. Brazil here is well over 50%, over to 85%, but there are lots of controversies about how it is being done and so on. And there are Scandinavian countries which have high reliance on renewable energy sources as well. They have good wave, tide, wind, etc., as well as maybe not as much solar as in lower latitude countries like Brazil. Nonetheless, here is biofuel energy production. This is total biofuel production measured in terawatt hours per year. Biofuel production includes both bioethanol and biodiesel. I hope you know what that means. If not, you can look it up. Bioethanol is essentially an additive to other fossil fuels to reduce its carbon footprint and so on. And biodiesel is directly used product from bio sources. Okay, so again, those countries light up: US and Brazil. China is doing pretty well, and all these Southeast Asian countries, and India is of course there with between 10 and 25 terawatts on this scale. If you go to photovoltaic power potential, so here are daily and yearly totals in photovoltaic power potential in kilowatt hours over kilowatt or kilowatt. We have to look up what kWp is. I think that's kilowatt potential, so that's the capacity as opposed to per hour. So this is, you can see these low latitude countries, the deserts, have a high number for daily totals as well as yearly totals. Obviously, Australia has a huge possibility, as well as these deserts here in Namibia and so on, and the Andes and so on, Western US down into Mexico, Central America, etc. In terms of solar power generation in 2019, electricity generation from solar measured in terawatt hour per year, you can see China and US dominate, but there is also Germany and other like Italy, France, Spain, and UK. This is which country is it? Saudi Arabia? I know. Saudi Arabia is down here. This is Turkey, I suppose. South Africa, Brazil, Australia, and so on. India is doing pretty well as well, with over 40 to 60 terawatt hours. This is in 2019. As we saw before, in the India's key indicators, investments in solar keep going up. If we look at the portfolio of renewable energy generation around the world from 1965, hydro, which obviously is also renewable to the extent of the hydrologic cycle continuing, even though there are climate change impacts on these things. Of course, there are other impacts in terms of the dams and the infrastructure associated with them. They've gone up continuously from 1,000 terawatts with solar and other renewables adding from early on and increasing in the total, even though hydropower dominates, of course. Wind is growing pretty well, solar is growing pretty well, so this trend is expected to continue, as we have seen in various projections and in the numbers that we are looking at in this particular book. Installed wind energy capacity, which we will come back to later on again. China is missing here, but you can see India is ramping up pretty well from 2005 onwards. Germany, which is very gung-ho on renewables, is doing very well in solar and wind, even though it has not completely weaned itself off of solar yet. So this is coming back to solar farms. Currently 0.4% of global electricity generation. Utility scale solar PV grows to 10% in the drawdown analysis by 2050. We assume an implementation cost of $1,445 per kilowatt, which is expensive, and the learning rate, so as more and more installations are done, the cost keeps coming down, and the rate is assumed to be 19.2%, which would drop the cost fairly significantly very quickly, resulting in implementation savings of $81 billion when compared to fossil fuel plants. Okay, so you can always compare against something to account for, or at least to calculate the savings. That increase could avoid 36.9 gigatons of carbon dioxide emissions, which is a big number, while saving $5 trillion in operational costs by 2050. The financial impact of producing energy without fuel. The co-benefits are also obviously very important in terms of pollution, air quality, health, productivity, and so on, right? So those are always external costs that are not completely involved in all models, but that's something to always keep in mind in terms of what the co-benefits are, especially for developing countries like India, where we looked at how the implementation will happen, whether they will be conditional or unconditional. So unconditional is when these countries would do whatever they need to do for their energy security, reducing energy poverty, and so on. Conditional is when they are given assistance, in which case their implementation would ramp up much faster. So there is the idea of the globe acting together as a unit, helping setting up climate funds, green funds, etc., World Bank loans, for example, and so on, various financial tools which motivate countries to implement climate solutions, especially renewable energy contributions to their total energy production. Okay, so we'll come to rooftop solar in the next podcast. This is just a quick run through to remind ourselves that solar farms are a big part of the solution, ranked at number 8 overall, and we'll keep looking at others in terms of this ranking.